Okay, so this will be an example on how to remove the white background from the artwork, or artwork from the white background. As you can see, I actually photographed my artwork. So I will be using this probably as a clip art, in a greeting card, or in a pattern, and I want to get it off of the white background. You may also notice that while I try to have a pretty even lighting, it is slightly darker here on this end and lighter here in this corner. I had a large softbox above me and extra light on this side. However, it ended up still having a little bit of darkness. So I usually start by getting rid of anything that I will not want to edit in Photoshop. So we're going to go ahead and crop it. And you also may have noticed the artwork wasn't photographed quite square. So it basically has a little bit of a tilt. However, I don't think in this case it's really going to matter that much. So I'm going to crop it using crop tool here in Camera Raw. And I'm going to rotate it because I like to see the way out. Also, as you may notice, there's some imperfections. So there's some sensor dust, like camera dust, that you notice here. But we'll get rid of all of this. So this is the cropping part. So we're going to head over right here in the right top corner into more of an edit. So I want to have, there's a little bit of warmth to this. So I'm going to go ahead and select white. I know the paper is actually a little bit on the warmer side, but I don't really mind. I want it kind of super neutral. I'm going to bring the exposure up. I'm going to bring contrast up. Usually when I edit photos, contrast is really not something I play a lot around with. But however, in the art extraction, that's a really useful tool. I'm going to bring backs down a bit. So not quite all the way, but you can see how here's watercolors blooming. And I really like that to show. So I'm going to be pretty far down. Now, easy way to see how even exposure is for your photograph, in case you're photographing your artwork, is to bring exposure down. And you're going to start seeing where it's going down really quick. So you can see that the bottom and the top corner are really going down. It also shows your defect. So like a texture or sensor dust. Here's some other sensor dust issues. So we got to keep it in mind. Even though we expose it, the information is still there and it may have harder time to select it. I'm going to bring it up back to my normal, but now since I know that this area is darker, I'm going to go to the linear gradient. That's that fourth button on the bottom. And I'm going to drag out from the top corner. And what I want to do is bring up the highlights. So I'm going to go and bring them up. As you can see, it's not really affecting the leaf so much. It's just affecting more of a background. So I'm going to bring it up fair amount. If you want it to be like less noticeable, you can drag out that gradient bit out and move it back out this way. As I said, the bottom corner also had a bit of it. So I'm going to add another mask with linear gradient. And same thing, you can see where if it's really tight, you can see how tight the transition is, but I like mine to be more even, so I'm gonna have it pretty wide, maybe even bring the exposure up just a tad. I think I might do this on the other top side as well. So add a linear gradient and bring it down, and let's do all four corners while we're at it. Linear gradient. And then bring it down a little bit here. So I think it's pretty even keel, although I see that this one's still darker. So I might bring another gradient up and layer it. So we have it a little bit Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. I also check on histogram. I want that um, curve here be pretty close to the edge, so I am actually going to go into my general editing in the basics, and I'm going to bring those whites up, and as you can see there, that little mountain range is heading over towards the end. So I like it. So this is a good starting point. So here we have our basic image, and before I start extracting it, I'm going to start with those imperfections. So I can go into this half a cookie thing. Oh, half a cookie. Let's close this up. And we're going to do levels. And I actually want to check where my levels are. And as you can see, this really shows where the issues are. So I'm going to go click back on the layer, the original layer. For this part, I don't mind actually editing straight on the layer. So I'm going to go ahead with patch tool. I'm going to select it, move it over. Looks like here is an issue. This one, let's see what we can do here. And we can do control. So I'll show you the thing for the shortcut. So we're gonna do fill, edit, or image adjustments. I think it's fill. There. Edit, fill, right here. Shift F5. So we're gonna under edit, fill, Shift F5. That I have selected on content aware. So with content aware, it's going to draw from things around. So fingers crossed, it knows where the edges are. And here we go. Yeah, I don't mind that little bump. So this is also an opportunity to brighten more of those layers. If at this point you feel like you do not want to edit anymore on the original layer, again, we're still having this underexposed levels layer on top. But I'm going to go ahead and copy the background layer. And at this point, I'm going to select the lightning tool, brightening tool. So we're going to go ahead and brighten it up a little bit. I have it selected at midtones. So it basically is going to get rid of some of that texture. And those darker corners. So once you remove that, let's toggle off the levels. And now it's looking pretty bright and even. But if you look on levels, you can see where the darker spots are. So we can go ahead and have some of the evenness here. You can even, I use a bracketing tool to reduce the size of my brush. And here we go. Get a little bit of those whites a little wider. And now when we remove levels, you can really see it. So what we're doing next is we will try to create a contrasty layer. So I'm gonna duplicate the background layer again, and this time I'm gonna go head into filter and camera raw filter. As you may notice in my workflow, I oftentimes push the limits of the image to kind of expose the imperfections, and that will give me an opportunity to find the edges and to make my work easier. But I have the original layer that is nice and bright. So here we're gonna go ahead and bring that contrast up so you can see whites get whiter, blacks get blacker. And we're gonna go ahead and bring the blacks up, and whites. I'm gonna bring whites up here. Shadow is gonna go down, and this particular image is black and white. So this is the simplest way to extract it, in my opinion. So when you have an image that's pretty much black and white, even though if you start playing with colors, you may notice some tonality to it. Like if we go into color mixer, we can see if there are any reds. So as you can see, as I or oranges, I move oranges, and certain things start flickering a bit. So that just shows that because this is being edited in RGB, not in grayscale, it's picking up on those tonalities. So in here, we also can see that probably in this area, maybe around here, as well as these transitional areas, may not be picked up as well. And let me show what I mean. So at this point, I like it pretty good the way it is. So I'll click OK. Also, we're going to go ahead in here and I'm going to remove that dot because I will not want it in the final image. So this is where we're going to start selecting. This is one of the easiest ways to do it, and this will be through filter or select color range, and we're going to select whites. Because there's more tonality in grays, I find it easier to select the background because it's pretty monotone. Even though you can see that on the bottom, this was still the darkest area, and it's picking up some of that. So you can do it straight on your image or actually in your preview window. So we're going to select this image, this part of it. If I start clicking somewhere else, it's deselecting the part I did it in the beginning. So I'm going to start with the beginning, and then we're going to do the dropper that has a plus sign. So now it's adding any other tonal or color selections. And I'm just going to go ahead pretty much around this a couple of times to make sure that we select all of it. It might select some of the flower, but we'll deal with it later. So click OK. And now we have a nice crisp image. Now, however, this is not my final image. This is not what I wanted. This is overexposed, underexposed and over edited in RAW. So I'm going to turn this off and go select the layer before. That was my original layer. Now selection is still in power, and we can see here it's done a better job selecting that if I would have based my selection off of more of the grayscale tonality. So I'm going to go ahead and add a mask. That little third button here, and here's the mask. However, what it did, it actually, the black is what removes it. Removes from image, so it is punching through and showing me the image below. So in this case, I like to see where I'm editing, so I usually add a plain color layer. So we're going to go ahead to our half cookie and select solid color. I want to see the solid color that's really going to show the detail where things are missing and where I might need to adjust editing. So it could be any of the colors. Let's go with this pretty. Let's see where we see more detail. I think this nice mute blue will do. Okay. And at this point, I find it easier to edit before I invert. So I can see here, there's a bit of tonality. I will want to have it show through. I see there's blue dots, which means that it selected some of these. So as we're going to go to the layer here on the bottom right, in the mask, so not on the actual image, but in the mask, and start painting in. So the background we want white. So this is all the stuff that eventually will not show. But I'm going to click away these little dots that I see, and this really helps me edit out any kind of imperfections, because once you have this clip art and you start using it, and all of a sudden you put it on a darker background, all these imperfections show up. Now I want to make sure that This area is fully uh, blue, so I do, it's not transparent, because right now if you put this flower on a darker background, it is gonna have some of that darkness peeking through. So what we're gonna do is go into that mask and select the black. So I'm gonna go ahead and select the black, and my brush is pretty close to fully crisp, but there is some transition, so I like it just a few percent off. It's image to image, in this case 93%. So, and also you want to make sure if you go into brush properties, the spacing is fully to the one side, to the left, no spacing. So now we can start painting in. And beauty is that since we're in a mask, even if I do this, I can Control Z and undo it, and it's not permanently erased, it's just masked off. So then we can start seeing all these little minute things that we want to fill in. So as I mentioned here, whoops, maybe reduce my brush size a little bit, and we're gonna paint it in. You also want to make sure you're definitely on black and white. So your black should be the blackest and white should be the whitest when you're working in a mask. If there's any kind of gray, it will not fully mask it because of the grayscale. So I am liking pretty much how it's looking right here. Actually, not quite. Let's get to gray, and I don't like that. I don't like these little hairs. And at this point, I'm ready to invert it. So we're still in this masked area. We're gonna go to Image, Adjustments, and Invert. And now this is how this final image is gonna look. So in this case on blue, maybe not the best option. If we look at on white or lighter blue, maybe better. But what I like to keep this dark blue for is starting to see where we need to refine the edges. And as you can see, there's just a slight bit of halo. So there's, as usual in Photoshop, multiple ways to do it. We're gonna go ahead, still stay in the mask, and double click on the mask. And at this point, we can start editing a little bit. So in this section, I like to shift the edge inwards, so we're going to shift it towards the left. And as you notice, if you start looking here, I'm going to zoom in. As you can see right here, that white is going to start disappearing. Now, sometimes it's not disappearing fast enough, so, and I don't want it really pixely like this. I often add just a touch of smoothness, so probably like a 3, not a lot. It smooths out the edges, kind of gives a little bit more of that evenness. Another super cool trick is if you hit feather, on one hand it kind of adds a bit of this blurriness, but what you'll do is compensate that blurriness with contrast. So whatever feather number you pick and play it with your own image, add contrast that's going to exceed the feather. So once we let go of it, then you can also see if you actually needed this smooth or not. So I'm going to add my contrast just a tad more, maybe feather just slightly less. And now you can see there's pretty much no white border. I like this way to edit my images. It gives a nice crisp, and you don't need to select it. I don't need to use a pen tool, and it gives the dimension, also some of this featheriness. But as you can see, I painted it in completely, so there's no translucency like you would see here in reds, or here a bit of a gradient. So at this point, I'm actually quite happy with this image. And I'm going to remove my background. I guess there's another background. So now this is going to be my final clipped image. Now I'm going to be ready to use it in patterns. greeting cards, stationery, surface pattern design, anything you like. So here's my quick tip for this easy way of removing white background, or lifting your watercolors from the white background. And another video to come on how we will remove more complex multicolor illustrations from the water.